This is the story of Maya, a 17-year-old girl living in a house that never quite felt like home. Maya's parents divorced when she was 9. Her dad remarried 3 years later to a woman named Linda. And from the very first day Linda moved in, Maya knew something was off. Linda wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. She didn't yell. She didn't name call. But she had this talent, this particular talent, for making Maya feel invisible. She rearranged the living room and packed away Maya's childhood photos to keep things tidy. She replaced Maya's bedroom curtains, the ones her late grandmother had sewn, because they didn't match the aesthetic. And whenever Maya's dad brought up Maya's interests or achievements, Linda would smile and redirect the conversation back to herself. Maya learned to disappear. And when you learn to disappear, you find somewhere private to put all the feelings you can't say out loud. For Maya, that place was her art studio, a converted storage room at the back of the house that her dad had cleared out for her the year before Linda arrived. It was barely bigger than a walk-in closet. One window, paint-stained floors, a second-hand easel her grandmother had gifted her. It was the only place in that house that was entirely, completely hers. And for 3 years, Maya had been working on something she called The Last Garden, a massive mixed-media painting, 4 feet wide, 3 feet tall, that depicted her late mother's garden exactly as she remembered it. Every flower her mother had planted, every color, every shadow. She had worked from memory, from old photographs, from the smell of her mother's perfume that still lingered on an old scarf she kept in a drawer. It was grief, turned into something beautiful. Teachers who had seen it said it was the most emotionally striking piece of student artwork they had ever encountered. Maya had already been quietly approached by a local gallery. There was talk of a scholarship. But here's the thing about masterpieces. They can't protect themselves. Now, before I tell you what Linda did, I need you to understand why she did it. Because when the full picture comes out later in this story, a lot of people online changed their initial reaction completely. It was a Saturday in March. Maya's dad had taken her younger half-siblings, Linda's kids, to a birthday party across town. They'd be gone for most of the day. Maya had a college prep class that morning. She told her dad she'd be back by noon. She got back at 10:47, early, because the class was cancelled. She walked in through the back door, the one that opened near her studio, and the first thing she noticed was the smell. Not paint, not canvas, not the particular dusty sweet smell of her art room. And bleach. Maya pushed open the studio door. The easel was folded up against the wall. The shelves had been wiped down. The floor had been mopped, still wet in the corners. And The Last Garden, 3 years of work, was gone. In its place, a stack of labeled storage boxes, craft supplies, kids' art materials, seasonal decor. Linda had converted Maya's studio into a storage room. Maya stood in the doorway for a long moment, completely still. Then she walked to the house, found Linda in the kitchen making lunch, and asked very quietly, "Where is my painting?" And Linda, without turning around from the stove, said, "Oh, that big canvas thing. I put it with the trash. The collectors already came this morning. I needed that space, Maya. I've been asking your father for months for more storage." She said it like she was talking about an old lampshade, like it meant nothing, like Maya meant nothing. Now, at this point in the story, most people who read this online assumed it was over, painting gone, regret impossible, case closed. But here's what nobody, not even Maya, knew yet. Linda had made one catastrophic mistake, and it was already in motion. What Linda didn't know was that Maya's art teacher, Ms. Okafor, had, 2 weeks earlier, quietly entered The Last Garden into a National Young Artists competition, a prestigious one, with a $15,000 scholarship prize and a feature in an international arts publication. Ms. Okafor had photographed the piece in detail and submitted the application herself as a surprise. She had been planning to tell Maya that weekend. She called Maya's phone at 11:15 that same morning to tell her she'd been shortlisted. Maya answered the phone standing in her emptied studio, eyes still red, voice barely working. Ms. Okafor said, "Maya, I have incredible news. The committee shortlisted your piece. They want to feature it at the National Showcase next month. They want the original. And Maya said nothing for 5 seconds. Then she said, "It's in a landfill." Ms. Okafor didn't understand at first. She thought it was a joke. Then Maya explained, flatly, factually, exactly what Linda had done that morning. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Miss Okafor said something that changed everything. "Maya, does your father know what Linda did?" He didn't. He was still at the birthday party. But he was about to find out. Because Miss Okafor, a woman who had spent 22 years in education and had seen exactly this kind of dismissal of a child's worth one too many times, was done being quiet about it. She called the school principal. She called Maya's father directly. She contacted the competition committee to explain the situation. And then, because Ms. Okafor was also the kind of teacher who understood the power of community, she posted about it, not tagging names, not calling anyone out, just a simple post about a student whose irreplaceable artwork was discarded by a family member, hours after being nationally shortlisted. She asked if anyone in the art community had resources or advice. That post got 47,000 shares in 72 hours. Now the internet did what the internet does. People had opinions, hot ones, divided ones. Some went after Linda like a house on fire. Others, and this is the part that might surprise you, started defending her. Why? Because someone dug something up, something from Linda's past that nobody in this story knew about yet. A journalist who covered the viral post did a little background digging. What she found wasn't a monster. What she found was a woman who, 12 years earlier, had been a promising artist herself. Linda had studied fine arts in college. She had a portfolio, a future, dreams of gallery shows and residencies. And then her first husband, Maya's stepfather, before Maya's father, had systematically dismantled all of it. He'd thrown away her work, mocked her ambitions, convinced her that art was a waste of time. By the time the marriage ended, Linda had stopped painting entirely. She hadn't picked up a brush in over a decade. The journalist's piece framed a complicated question. Did Linda destroy Maya's painting out of cruelty? Or did she destroy it because somewhere deep and broken inside her, she had been taught over and over that art didn't matter, that she didn't matter? The comment sections erupted. Half said, "It doesn't matter why she did it. What she did was unforgivable." The other half said, "This is a woman who never healed her own wound," and passed it on. Both sides had a point. But here's the moment that cut through all the noise. Maya's father sat Linda down and showed her the competition shortlist. Her name wasn't on it. Maya's was. But he showed her the entry description that Ms. Okafor had written, the part that described the painting. A young artist's act of love for a mother she lost, every brushstroke a memory, every color, a word she never got to say. Linda read it 3 times, and then she did something nobody expected. She asked to speak to Maya, alone. I'm going to tell you what happened in that conversation. But first, I need you to think about something. Because the question this whole story comes down to isn't really about Linda. It isn't even really about the painting. It's about something much harder. Can a sorry ever be enough? And who decides? Hold that thought. Maya agreed to the conversation. She sat across the kitchen table from Linda. And Linda, for the first time since Maya had known her, didn't use the practiced smile. She told Maya everything. About her ex-husband. About her art. About the years of silence she'd swallowed. She wasn't making excuses. She said that directly. I'm not telling you this as an excuse. What I did was wrong. There is no version of this where I was right. Then she said, I saw that painting once. You left the studio door open. I stood in the hall and looked at it for a long time. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I think that's part of why I couldn't stand it being there. Maya was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, Did you ever try to find your own work? After everything? Linda shook her head. Maya stood up, left the room, and came back with something. A spare canvas, unused, still in the wrapping. She set it in front of Linda, and she said, My painting is gone. You can't fix that. But I'm not going to let this house be a place where art goes to die. The gallery, upon hearing the full story, offered Maya a solo exhibition slot to recreate the last garden, with full documentation of the process, framing the new work and the story behind its destruction as the exhibition itself. The national competition granted Maya a special circumstance exemption, awarding her an honorary recognition and a partial scholarship based on the photographic documentation alone. And Linda started painting again, quietly, in the same studio. Maya let her. She didn't forgive her all at once. That's not how real forgiveness works. But she didn't let another woman's art die in that house. Here's what I keep thinking about. Linda stood in that hallway and looked at Maya's painting. She knew it was extraordinary. She could see it, because once she had been capable of making something just like it. And she threw it away anyway, not because she was evil, but because beautiful things, to people who've been broken, can feel like an accusation, like a mirror held up to everything they gave up, everything that was taken from them. And Maya, this 17-year-old girl who had every right to walk out of that house and never look back, handed Linda a blank canvas instead. I don't know if that was wisdom or just grace. Maybe it was both. But here's the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want to know what you think. If someone destroyed the most important thing you ever created, even if they were broken when they did it, could you ever hand them a blank canvas? Or would some things just be too far gone? Linda stood in that hallway and looked at Maya's painting. She knew it was extraordinary. She could see it because once she had been capable of making something just like it. If this story hits you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because every week I bring you stories exactly like this one. Human, complicated, real. I'll see you in the next one.